Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abi.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Can I start off with saying, I know for a fact there are gender differences. I'll prove it right here. Today, I watched a video. There was this guy with a big can of gasoline, and then there's a bike jump. And he's now poured gasoline all over the bike jump. It's on fire. And then all of a sudden, the camera rotates, and you see a guy riding on a motorbike in his underwear with a crash helmet, just at high speeds. And he goes flying off this bike jump.
Through the fire.
And it's wet out, mud everywhere. And he just goes flying off the bike, face first into the mud. Number one, laughed my ass off. Number two, I thought, how could I build that? I thought,
How could either I do this or get someone else to do this with me?
I would love to see a friend do that. And I had this thought in the middle of that. I'm like, I bet that there are hundreds, if not thousands of men that watch this that were like, that's given me a brilliant idea. And there's probably maybe a handful of women that thought, yeah, I think that would be interesting. Maybe out of probably the million people that have watched that video.
So basically what you're saying is the thing that proves there's differences in gender is stupidity.
I'm going to say yes to that. I'm going to say yes. You're not wrong. There is something innate inside of us, men more often than not, that are just like geared towards, that looks crazy. I should try that. Even though we've just watched a guy crash and burn and he's covered in mud. You're like, me too.
I know. I was dying laughing that was your thought. Like, look at how fun this looks. I was like, I'm not even entertained by the video. I'm like, I bet you watched that like 10 times in a row.
You're not wrong. Over and over again. He sails over the bike into the mud. I just, oh God, that was so hey, friends. That literally has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today. In fact, today.
Well, it's about crashing and burning.
Oh, dang, girl. Way to.
Face in the mud.
Yeah, way to really tie that into this episode. That was good. That was good.
I'm good at what I do.
I didn't even, I wouldn't come up with that.
Thanks.
Good job.
Thanks.
Well, hey.
Can I just say?
What? Yep, you can say anything.
I love you.
You do?
I do, and I'm thankful that I do this podcast with you.
Oh.
You're a good friend, and you're a good podcast host, and you're good eye candy.
You are right on every one of those points.
I just think it's been a while since I've just talked about how appreciative I am of you.
Oh, thank you.
I don't think that people know that this podcast would not happen without you.
Mm.
If it was up to me, I would forget every week, or I'd forget to hit record when we start the recording.
It makes me want to check and see if I hit record.
Well, maybe you should, because what if that's an intuition?
Nope.
And then I would not know how to edit it, and then I would get bored about writing the things. You just make this podcast happen.
Oh, thank you.
You're a dream of a partner.
That was an unexpected accolade.
Yeah. How does it feel?
Pretty good. I'm going to put that in my pocket and save it for later. Well, thank you for the kind compliment. But we are talking about crashing and burning today and face planting it in the mud, apparently. And we're going to get into a topic that feels a little bit heavy. And it is heavy. It should be heavy. The topic should be one that we feel a little heavy around.
Well, I'm going to explain to people what it is, because it's not overwhelmingly heavy. I think it is meant to be reality confirming for people. It's meant to help people who've experienced this be like, yeah, me too.
Yeah, totally.
But I guess it is a little heavy.
So can I tee it up?
Yeah.
So recently, there is a pastor named Mike Bickle from a movement called the International House of Prayer, or IHOP. Some of you may or may not know that. It is its main mission has been to, I don't know, pray 24/7. It just sounds exhausting to me. I have people that I've known that have been part of that movement or around it.
I was.
Abby being an example of it. It was not a movement that I felt drawn to. It felt torturous as they would starve themselves to death.
Yeah, there was a lot of fasting. In fact, I met you at one of their conferences.
You did.
We can't negate it too much.
We can't. However,
that is how I felt for your charming
You're right.
soul.
I was so bored that I left early and got out of that conference.
You did. You're like, this is not for me.
Is torturing my soul. I have to go. But yeah, so it is.
I do love that you have such a strong sense of self because you loved God, always have.
Yeah.
But were comfortable if you didn't love God the same way as what was happening around you. Like that was a great example.
Other people expressed
you loved God and you spent hours with God and really enjoyed his presence and praying for people and all of that stuff, but you did not like that conference. And so you left.
Yeah.
And I think that sense of self is something that really drew me to you.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So
you've never your relationship with God has never kind of followed the rules. It's really been about you having a personal relationship more than following what everybody says you have to do.
Yeah, what it should look like, how that should be expressed. I know that for me, the law of love is the one that it's my common North Star that I'm sitting asking that question in every circumstance, which causes me to be in a relational connection to my Creator and relational connection to the people around me, because all of a sudden, what is permissible to do given any circumstance, like, oh, this isn't immoral.
Right.
However, it doesn't equal love for this circumstance or this relational connection. And that's something that's always been a governor for me. And it's been the thing that's course corrected me whenever I've done stuff, even where I could be like, well, that's not immoral. However, that doesn't feel like it's loving. It doesn't feel, and I need to go look at that and why am I operating out of that?
Yeah, you really have had that. You know, I know that we'll wind up where we're getting, but I kind of like the soft entry.
Yeah.
So I'm liking having some dialogue a little bit. But
yeah.
When we were dating, the law of love is what you really went by. I remember I was very, very prude. Grew up in the purity culture.
Yeah.
And had a lot of rules around what dating should look like and be like. And I remember one of the things that you said was, oh, I don't have conviction about those boundaries that you have. The ones that, some of the extreme ones that I had. But you were like, but I have the conviction that it's my job to love you. So if those are your boundaries, me crossing them would be crossing love.
Yeah.
And that's a great example of what you're talking about. Like you felt some of those things were permissible. Like you're like, oh, this is fine for us to do. But you were like, but if you have a boundary here, crossing that is breaking the rule of love.
Yeah.
And I thought that was incredibly mature and remarkable.
It's interesting. It's very easy for people to judge others who violate cultural law, right? Like, so they go, oh, well, this isn't okay with our culture. However, this doesn't violate love. And it's very easy to get very judgmental about that. I think that that's one of the things that I experienced a lot was, and that was something that was very, turned me off towards being connected within that institutional system is because a lot of times.
Oh, people would be like, you cuss, so there's something wrong with you.
Right.
But you're following the law of love.
Or I smoke cigars or I had beers with friends or whatever. And I was respectful and honoring of people. I was loving of people. Or,
right.
You know, there was, you know, things like that. And it didn't mean that I didn't make mistakes and I wasn't messy. And it didn't mean that I didn't have places where I did destructive things that I had to face within myself.
Right.
However, the things that were noteworthy to other people were the things that didn't fall in line with their cultural expectations.
Yeah.
And that was something that was very confusing to me. And this is why it was confusing to me, because oftentimes I was able to be privy to the realities of the behind the scenes circumstances.
Yep.
So there were so many places where I'm like, yeah, outwardly you express your life like this and put on this facade, but behind the scenes, there's all kinds of darkness that violate not only your cultural law,
Yep, but also the law of love.
the law of love.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one that was very difficult for me. And I think that that's one that's been very difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Which is that's where the word hypocrisy really comes in, is
Yes.
like, oh, you preach one message, but then you do something different behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And there has been this thing where the institutionalized religious system, I think forever, I think it's just part of the nature of that,
Yep.
has branded itself as holy.
Yeah, and the rule makers.
Right.
But they are also the rule breakers, because we all are.
Yep, because we're all human.
Mm-hmm.
And until we collectively as humans acknowledge that I am human, I am messy and I am broken, I do not have everything all together, and I'm loved inside of that, and there's things that I need to face within me inside of that, and I need to heal of inside of that. Until we do that, we'll perpetually create unrealistic mountaintops that we're supposed to stand on that we only fall off of.
Totally.
And along the way, hit a lot of people on the way down.
So today we're going to talk about church messes.
Yeah.
I distracted you, but you were talking about International House of Prayer.
Yeah, I was going to get back to that.
Ahead.
Yeah. And this is something I think that's applicable to so many people who have either been offended with the institutional church from an outward perspective, never participated in it, but watched it outwardly, or they've been within it and they've experienced these types of pains and hypocrisy, and they've also participated in it, because we can all say that at some level inside of our fear of being rejected, we've participated in hiddenness and arrogance and pride, where we've like pretended like we're better than other people. So we're all guilty of this at some level.
Absolutely.
Right. And we have to look at ourselves as humans and acknowledge I'm guilty of this. And sometimes the institutions that I'm part of are guilty of this, and we cannot turn blind eyes. We have to begin to become honest with ourselves, and within our communities, we need to become honest. So we're having this dialogue. I think it relates to so many people and the pain that exists for so many of us around this. And there's a great subject matter that's come up, and that happens to be Mike. And Mike, the whole controversy around Mike is that Mike is yet another one of those leaders who, which we've another movement leader, which is something we've heard in all the denominations and institutional systems, and it's in politics, but we expect it out of political leaders.
It's true. It's true.
But we keep telling ourselves we shouldn't expect it in these spaces, and it's sad that it is in these spaces, but they are in these spaces, and there's reasons for why it keeps happening in these spaces, and we'll probably get into that. But going back to, so basically Mike in the late 90s, he was around 41, early 40s, and there was a 19-year-old Jane Doe that was there. He went to her, told her that God told him that he had a dream where God told him that his wife was going to die, something along those lines. I may be butchering it a little bit, but the gist of it is that she was going to die, and then he was going to marry this girl. Now, the information that's come out is that there were sexual exchanges, and this was a continued process with this woman. There's also information behind the scenes that they're bringing up to the surface that says that it happened with more than one woman in different ways or stuff like that. It also goes on to elaborate that it was found out that his son was having an affair with another man's wife at the church, and they end up finding out that also Mike had been involved with that man's wife in some way, shape, or form, and that's something that I dug further into today.
Okay. Regardless, our goal is not to actually spend all of our time on what the allegations are about Mike.
But here it is, a community and a system that all of a sudden has an explosion of truth that starts coming out.
Well, and then the other things that are coming out is manipulative coercion and bullying and abuse of the power dynamic.
Yep,
and I'm bringing that up.
Reading emails, we've seen all of it.
Yeah, but the point is that this is what I'm wanting to not focus specifically on the IHOP situation, because this is just a situation that we've been involved in so many of these stories.
Yep.
Me and you. We have way too many situations.
We've been part of institutional systems repeatedly where we've watched this take place.
Yes.
And within the context of this, and this is what's valuable about the IHOP example, is right now there's a huge conversation around how they're handling it. There's an executive leadership team that has been seemingly hiding a lot of it or not knowing how to handle it and kind of shutting it down. Whereas there's these outside advocates who were formerly part of that institution that it got brought to the light to, who have been shining a light on it saying, hey, this needs to be looked at and this needs to be handled in a very specific way. And so what you're seeing inside of this is a historical problem on one side, which is people within the institution bearing these types of problems, which is where people feel powerless. They feel out of control. They feel like it's pointless and it's hopeless to actually say something.
Yep.
And then on the other side, like oftentimes there's not advocates who are actually saying, no, this needs to be talked about.
Yeah. And I think that it's been interesting. So there's a couple things to note for yourself when you're listening to stories or you're seeing another story unfold, is I think it's important for us to recognize how this ties into our own personal pain point. If you find yourself hearing a story about church leadership failure or whatever, and you feel like a righteous anger, you start to feel bitter, or you start to feel like F the church, screw it all, all those feelings, that means there's probably some pain in there beyond this circumstance. Because I'm looking at it and I'm like, honestly, like I feel sad about what's happening, but I'm not connected enough or like cared about Mike Bickle or IHOP enough for it to impact me the way that it's impacted me.
Right. You're saying that you have an impact from this experience that you can feel just blowing up inside of you.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, but I'm not that close to them. Why is this big?
Yes.
Like, yes, that's a bummer.
Yes.
That there's like hypocrisy, lies, coercion, all of that over there. But what's happening inside of me?
Yeah. And I think that is important anytime that we see some kind of situation in the news or the media or whatever.
Yeah. It doesn't have to just be church type stuff. It can be all kinds of
politics. It could be anything. And it really strikes a chord in us. That is a time to turn inward. What is this pushing on for me?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it. I was just actually talking to you about it today, how I grew up in this exact situation. I grew up in a situation where there was a predator at the church I grew up in, and there were multiple women who complained about it, and they continually, the complaints, I don't know what they did with them. I don't know what happened, but they like got dismissed or diminished over and over and over again. My mom was one of the women that was affected by it. And 20 years later, the pastor on staff who had been creating this problem for years finally had an inappropriate interaction with a pastor's wife. And that's when
all of a sudden the hammer came down.
Someone finally said enough is enough. And once that happened, so many people came forward. So many women, I think they had like multiple support groups that they had to form from all of the women that had these inappropriate exchanges and felt powerless and out of control and victimized over the years. And all the women who had tried to have a voice and it didn't matter, it didn't affect things.
Right.
There is this deep, and so that was my whole, I mean, that created a very deep church kind of trauma for everyone involved in it. It creates trauma for the people who don't know about it, because all of a sudden somebody that you trusted for a long time, you find out isn't who you thought they were. And then for all the people who were like, I have felt this for a long time, it feels so like frustrating how hard of a fight it was. And so even for me, listening to the stuff, I can recognize there is that feeling inside of me of, I have felt this before. And then you have just the global thing that's happening, which is, this is not the first. I mean, there are so many of these stories of people who were famous in the faith. And then you find out that it was super, super messy. And one of the things I'm really appreciating, there's a video that we will link in the podcast information by the advocate group, I think.
Yeah.
That would be important for everyone to watch because it was very
even if you know nothing about the movie.
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't have to know anything, because what it was for me is it was healing to see what it looks like for someone to, they were brokenhearted and tender and humble
on multiple levels
and calling for truth to matter.
Yeah. One of the things that was fascinating to me as a side note about them sharing is I saw them have a heart of brokenness for the Jane Doe and her husband, because there was pain there, and the other Jane Does that possibly are out there that they haven't been able to bring out. They were broken with regards to Mike, because he was a spiritual dad to them, and they were like, "This is just sad. Like, I don't want this for his life. Why did he do this? How is there so much manipulation that's coming from him?" Right? There was that. Then there was the sadness about like, hey, is there anything that we've done wrong inside of this, trying to bring this to the light and stuff. But I saw a tremendous amount of humility and humanization of people across the board, and a desire.
They didn't villainize anyone.
They didn't. And they said that there needs to be something made right, that there's an injustice that's here, and there needs to be a healthy accountability.
And I think that is really what hooked me.
Yeah.
That felt so healing to me, because I told that story of the church I grew up in, and the pastor that I grew up in did whatever they wanted, and they did so many immoral things. There's more things that Mike did. It actually reminded me a lot of that. And there was no one that held him accountable. Yeah. There was no one that and there is this place of, I'm going to go to you privately, one-on-one. I'm going to go to you privately with a group of people. We want to be able to talk through things. But there is a point where especially if someone's not repentant, where then you've got to let people know. And I was in the inner meetings growing up, where I knew the information of what was happening and what the pastor was hiding and what they were covering up and what they were comfortable doing to manipulate for their own family. I was there, and I saw the injustice, and there wasn't somebody to say, this is not okay.
Yeah.
There wasn't someone to step in and say, enough is enough. And that power structure, that power dynamic, that fear of getting kicked out or replaced or whatever. And so that is why there's something so, and I don't blame anybody. I don't feel mad. I feel like no one knows what to do in these situations.
Yeah.
Whether you're the person who's hearing all the stories. There's somebody I'm working with right now who, in their own church, someone shared a story of them feeling uncomfortable. They didn't have a roadmap of what to do on how to confront the head pastor about a situation that happened. Like, there's not a roadmap. So I don't feel upset when people don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But I do feel like it was so healing to see people who it didn't feel like they were wanting to crucify or punish, but they were wanting what has been made wrong to be made right.
Yeah. Yeah, that did feel really good to watch that. And I think that we as human beings, I think that we were designed, being that we're designed in and through love, there is a written code inside of us to want justice. Justice isn't necessarily punishment, but it is righteous responses of accountability that says, this isn't okay. Yeah. And then when we see injustice that people aren't like wanting to address and actually create accountability, it is very painful, because we're watching love being violated in another way. Okay. It's not just the original infraction of love. Now you have another infraction of love of people doing nothing about it. And again, that causes a lot of pain. But like you said, inside of it, when you're seeing this, you're like, okay, there's something inside of me that feels a lot of pain about the history of being part of experiences that ended up dramatically affecting my life. And I think that that's a great question for a lot of people, because these type of experiences, as sad as they are, they also become invitations
to heal
inside of us. And, for me, it's interesting because this circumstance brought up a situation inside of my own life. Yeah. And a person that I used to be in relationship with, who also violated and abused me in certain levels. I saw them release a video on YouTube actually addressing judgment within the institutional system and stuff like that. And the conversation that they had felt very much like they were almost gaslighting the world before a spotlight gets turned on them, where they were suddenly being like, hey, those guys over there, you know, this stuff happens and
they're bad.
And this is why this happens.
Yeah.
And if you don't do these things, this will, and it provoked a lot of pain for me. And I ended up getting in a phone call with Paul Young. And I was like, Paul, what do I do? Because I want to react.
Totally.
I want to have a very strong reaction. And, you know, as he was processing with me, he was like, well, first off, you need to learn how to be present with this moment on this one, because there's going to be,
you need to feel your own pain.
You need to feel your own pain.
Instead of figuring out, what do I do right now?
Yeah.
Right away.
He was like, you know, you could participate in a way where you do what other people do, which is eat from that tree of the knowledge of good or evil. You can eat from that tree of judgment, and you could go try to set fire to someone's life. And it would make sense why you would do that. However, you're not eating from the tree of life in that. And,
right.
and it doesn't mean that there's not a time for exposure.
And
right?
It doesn't mean that there's not a pathway for that.
And it doesn't mean there's not a pathway for that, and a pathway for conversations and all this other stuff. But he said, first and foremost, it comes to tending to yourself. And we got into a further discussion about my experience and what happened for me. And I sob cried for probably 35, 40 minutes. And he cried with me. And that was so good for my soul, because like, I could feel that me getting angry, I had this emotion when I saw this person's video where it was like, who the F are you to do this? And like, I was just violently angry, right?
Yeah.
And if I continued down the road of looking at this person's behavior, not that it doesn't need to be addressed, but if I continue down the road of focusing on, oh, you know what, maybe this person needs to be exposed to, and maybe these, like, then I actually would deter from taking care of a need.
From your own heart pain that is coming up. And and I think this happens, sometimes we also get so tunnel visioned on, okay, I need to also, like, this is not whether you should expose or not expose people. I think speaking truth is so important in every situation, but sometimes we get so focused on what am I going to do to this situation that we forget to tend to our own wound.
Right. Right.
And that's what I'm seeing you do, which is when this stuff started happening with IHOP and Mike Bickle, it began the process of you looking at an abusive situation that happened.
Yeah.
And you recognizing, I think that really impacted me.
Yes.
I think that really actually affected me. And instead of getting hyper focused on what do I do outside to get justice?
Yeah, outside of me to get justice.
You've started by, what do I do to start to feel my pain, to start to grieve my pain, and allow myself to get that connection. And I've seen you actually, something that I think is so important for every person who's gone through something is to share your story. If you've been through any form of abuse or any form of that manipulation, that grooming, that all of that stuff, which I would say is all a part of what happened with you. But there's a secret shame that can start to happen in situations, a subconscious one. And so sometimes the beginning of breakthrough is just beginning to share your story. Whatever it is that you're afraid that people will judge you for, whatever it is that you're, and that's what happens when things happen with leaders. We're often convinced that if people know, they'd blame us. Yeah. Or if people know, they wouldn't believe us. Or if people know, there's so much pain. And so it's really important to begin to just tell our own stories. And I've watched you start to do that. You've picked a few people that we're close to. Yeah. And you're like, I just need to talk about what happened to me.
Including my counselor is one of them.
Yeah, and a few
cried with him and
mentors
in our life, peers, a few peers.
And what you've done is allowed people to be with you.
Yes,
in the moment, and and you haven't made it again about what's the next step. The first step is to just be heard and to be loved.
Because at the end of the day, an aspect of justice is the repair of the human soul.
Yes.
Like, for me to get justice in this situation, for my experience, that this person isn't going to be able to pay back that debt.
Yeah.
But for me to get justice is that I get this taken care of, and I get the belief systems that were broken repaired from that situation. And I get reconnected to a part of myself that I buried. You know? As a side note, this is something that was flying around in my head. For me, there's this belief that there must be something wrong with me.
That it affected you.
That this affected me. And I went for years compartmentalizing this circumstance. And
you were in a situation where it was truly belittled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was dominated and belittled completely in it. And it wasn't just, we all have character flaws, and it wasn't in a circumstance of someone just having a simple character flaw that wasn't kind or something. There was actual abuse that was involved in violation. And I looked at it, and there was such justification for the behavior. And how would I put this? Normalization.
Yeah.
That then I said, I must be abnormal for
this affecting me so much.
Yes, for this being so painful. So then I literally went on for years and just put it in a box.
Totally.
And went on even relationally with this person. And like, oh, we're friends. Like, this is great. We're fine. We're not, but I didn't know that. And this happens to a lot of people, where we have a part of ourselves say, I don't like something. And we go, oh, it's just me. I'm just wrong.
Totally. Yeah.
So anyways, all that to say, again, going back to the word justice and stuff like that, justice begins with taking care of our own heart. And I think that I watch people, now this is from all different fields. This isn't just the religious institution. This is political institutions and stuff like that. You'll see people blow up about all kinds of a myriad of things. And they might not be right, and they might not be good. But there's such an intensity aimed outwardly that they're actually never resolving the thing inside of themselves, that there's the invitation to heal that thing within themselves. It's still, I can get healed, and I could still take actions and say, and part of this process is I actually do need to hold someone accountable outwardly.
Yes. Right? Yeah. And I wanted to say, I think the first step is to take care of your own heart so it doesn't get lost. Because sometimes in the parade for justice, we actually still don't tend to our own
And then at
heart.
the end of the day, you get what you think was justice.
Right, and it still doesn't.
Yeah,
heal
you may
your
be
heart.
a full exposure of someone, and
Sure.
their life is in shambles, and they've paid restitution or whatever, and you're going, man, that just doesn't taste so good.
I still feel the pain.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think the beautiful part has been, as you've shared with people, there's been such a validation of the violation and the betrayal. And there's been such clarity, because even though both of us logically know, it's clear enough. It's very clear. It's like
absolutely.
not something that could be arguable. It's
not
not
at all.
There's some things that are like, well, you could perceive that multiple different ways. This is a situation that you couldn't perceive
not at all.
in any other way.
No one would perceive it in any other way except for this is.
But even knowing that, what happens is when we live through circumstances, we can normalize them.
Yep.
And so every time you've shared it and somebody's been like, Justin, that is not okay on any level ever. Do you know how violating that is? Every time that has happened, it has healed a part of your heart.
Absolutely.
It has healed a part of you to be like, yes, okay, that's right.
Yeah. And it helped in eradicating some of the thunder that was inside of me. It didn't mean that it eradicated my desire to, look further into this and see how I need to handle this now that it's an awareness for me. But it began to take that intensity out of it. And it actually gives room for clarity, because as love breaks in and repair, validation, and attunement and all of that breaks in, and all of a sudden, like, the spinning out stops, and then you settle, and then you find that peace where all of a sudden you get to pursue the steps that you want to take in a place of wisdom, because you've actually found peace being restored to you as love is being brought in. Yeah.
So it's and you have a plan to actually continue forward with having a voice, because there is the part that what happens to us we deserve to have a voice about, but then also to make sure that it doesn't continue to happen to other people. Yeah. It's important that we actually learn to have a voice. And that's scary. And so many people, and this is what breaks my heart, even in my own story, so many people, when they have a voice, it gets diminished.
Yeah.
When they have a voice, it doesn't get heard. When they have a voice, someone says, oh, I hate that happened to you, but if we ruin the reputation, the whole church will be divided. Or this will hurt way more people if people find out about this. Yeah. Like, so many times the institution has protected the reputation of the institution over taking care of the people.
When you look at something like, I'm not beating up on the Catholic Church. It's just a very relatable one universally in America to talk about, and worldwide, because there's been a lot of spotlight on it. But speaking of spotlight, what was it? The Spotlight. That group of people, it was people outside of the institution that had to put a light on the matter.
Yes.
Now,
I wept watching that movie.
Absolutely.
And I felt the heart of God so much, because there is something that is redemption and justice about bringing into the light something that has been hidden.
Right. And if the Catholic Church had taken and held a mirror up to itself and said, hey, this is what's happening. Mm-hmm. And this is enormous.
Yes.
And we will not turn a blind eye. Mm-hmm. We will be the first to bring this to the light. Mm-hmm. We will be the first to bring people into the light that have participated in these types of activities.
Yeah.
And we will fight on behalf of those who are victims of this situation. What they actually would have established is trust. Mm-hmm. Because one way or another, that conversation was going to happen.
Yep.
But had they been the ones to initiate that one and begin to initiate a repair process, then people would have been like, we're all pretty effed up. However, they happen to be looking at themselves, and that feels really trustworthy that they're going to do that and bring about course correction. It may take a while to rebuild trust inside of that, but it's different than when it comes out from another source.
Yeah, it feels it's very true. You have the power. And that's, so in the video that we watched with Alan Hood and the Advocate group, one of the things that was said is that they are the first group that was a part of the leadership who are calling for a third party investigation. And this feels really important to me, because I think this is something that lots of church leaders haven't looked at. But you've got to think, most of the time when there's some form of sexual immorality or some kind of abuse or some kind of situation like that, what happens is the church elders or the board are part of investigating that, or the church leadership. But you've got to think, all of those people were mothered or fathered by the people in charge. Right. And all of those people have conflicting interests. All those people are employed by that person. All those people are like, there's a very clear power dynamic that is happening. And that is why, that's literally why the Advocate group was like, we have to have people outside of us or we'll fight. Like, how can we investigate our own father with our spiritual father that we had with an unbiased opinion? Right. Well, and knowing that we'll probably have self-preservation show up, knowing that we'd want to protect the movement. Like, there's so many conflicting interests inside of us. That's why an outside party, and this is what we've seen happen over and over again, is that doesn't happen. When allegations happen, people handle it inside, and it becomes like a family system. Like, oh, we do it our own way here with our own family in our own family style, instead of having help outside. And I actually don't even know if there is good emotional healthy outside agencies either. Because I don't know. It'd probably be good for some nonprofits to spring up who actually know how to handle.
They may exist.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I don't know. I haven't researched a lot, but I'm just saying, even then, there is no guarantee, even if you get an outside party. I've heard before of somebody getting an outside party that was actually paid by the same person. And like, there's messes that can happen with humanity, but the goal is our heart posture. Is our heart posture that we are willing to look at ourselves, that we're willing to look at the system we built, that we're willing to hold that what we've been a part of may not be perfect.
Yeah.
That there might be messes that we might need to clean up. And that is what felt so moving to me about this. And that is what I'm wanting to, in our own lives, this has been a huge part of our own story is we've had multiple times where we've had to expose people and not do it. We not expose people, but expose the truth about something that was going on.
Bring to light truth of something that was really messy.
And it is hard. It's not clear cut on exactly how do we move.
It's very
through
gray
this.
matter trying to figure out, especially when you haven't had to do it.
Yeah. Most people have never done it before.
Yeah. And you're just like, I don't even know what to do with this. And I'm confused. There's so much confusion and stuff to have conversations.
And this is, something that we have set up in our own business because we want to be accountable. That's our hearts. We want to take ownership. We know that we are imperfect people and there are imperfect things we do. So even in our own business, we have a pathway that if people need to get somebody outside of our business involved to mediate a conversation or to have a conversation, there is a pathway for that to happen. So that, and we haven't had somebody need that.
But building that, and I think in infrastructure, I think that that's something that's not built in infrastructures. I think that we culturally, especially within the church system, haven't thought maybe that's actually something that would be really good and necessary.
Yeah. How do we take care of people with a power differential? Because there is a power differential. If you're working for us, or if you go to a church and it's the head pastor or a pastor over you or somebody that it's scary to have a voice with someone above you. And if you don't feel like they listen to you, or if you don't feel like your voice is heard, you're going to feel powerless. And that's going to be really scary for you. And so you need to know that there is a way that you can have a voice and that it matters. Now, we also believe in having a voice with kindness.
Yeah.
And even in the process of what you're doing on the journey that you're going through, how you are going to confront is still holding that universal law of do unto others like you would have them do to you.
And humanizing the person inside of my head while having, a strong real conversation about my experience.
Yeah. I can decide this is clearly wrong and it was not okay. And it really affected me.
Yeah.
And I know that you're a human, but also we need to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that going back to, not hammering on the institutional system, but when they were talking, a lot of people are talking about how do we get here? How do we get there? And that happens over and over again. How do we get here? But there's a hyper spiritualism and a spiritual bypassing that is cultural within religious systems. And there's a rejection of counseling. There's a rejection of emotional health. There's a rejection of these types of things that actually are the gateway to getting out of those types of messes. They're the doorway to actually living a lifestyle that it doesn't have to go to that. It doesn't have to go to a public exposure. If you have a different lifestyle that even you do make that type of a mess, that within your culture, there's such conversations about heart, emotion, relationships that it gets dealt with, because then people communally go, hey, great. This is stuff we talk about. We hit these things head on, face first. We look at them, and this is something we need to talk about within our community before this thing gets bigger. And that's a healthy normalization, normalizing talking about the messy stuff inside of our worlds as much as we talk about the things that we love and we celebrate, right? But again, these institutions, these systems, they are based around this idea that I have to be perfect. We brand ourselves. Again, I go back to we've branded ourselves as holy, as righteous. And as somebody
who's ahead of you, who knows everything, who's supposed to have the answer for everything, who's supposed to not struggle anymore.
Which creates a cage, creates a system where you're trapped inside of it, where you can't actually, when you're beginning the process of making messes that end up escalating into devastating messes, there's no way out. You've already, hung yourself from your own noose basically at that point. And so there has to become a deep value within the spiritual communities
Mm-hmm.
for heart health.
Yes.
And they need to go hand in
And
hand.
for confession. I mean, like even for me, so I grew up a pastor who was really healthy, that felt safe to me.
Yeah.
Was Pete's dad. And one of the things he always said was, if you confess the little things, you'll never have a big thing to confess.
Yeah.
And that goes against the culture of I need to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have the living a lifestyle where there are people who know you, who you can be fully honest with about the dark parts of you. And I remember a story that he used to tell, and he told it regularly, and it gained a lot of respect for me, was that he found himself just a little excited to see like the secretariat that he worked with.
The secretary?
Like, yeah. Like he just noticed that he was feeling like a little bit excited when to see them.
Right.
And so he told the elder board at that level,
right.
I noticed that I'm just feeling this little thing. And when he said it, he said he could feel the
power of that.
The power of it break.
Right.
And then there's also like practical things that then you can, set up to do both things. Now, there are some people who are narcissistic and they can manipulate that stuff.
Totally.
They can like fake repent and bring up things. And that's a complicated scenario.
That's a whole other thing.
But there are a lot of people out there that like, if they have the ability to actually, there's a lot of people who want to do good.
Yeah.
And who find themselves in messes because they didn't have anyone they could confess to. And I've made that a huge part of if I feel anything that I like would be ashamed of, I tell Pete right away.
Yeah.
Like I have like 4 people that I call that I'm like, I just thought this thought. Maybe it's like, I felt jealous of this person, or I felt like this thing come up inside of me. Whatever that ugly thing is that I'm concerned about, I immediately bring it into light.
And you're not bringing it in context of I have so much shame, like I'm shamefully bringing this, like I'm a bad person. It's, I'm bringing this so that I continue to maintain freedom because this feels healthy for my heart. This feels like this breaks shame inside of my world as I dialogue about this.
Well, and what it does is my friends help me get to what is the root going on.
Right. Like what is really
actually happening inside that is leading you towards this thing? What is actually connecting you to?
Yeah.
And when you start to feel that, then you can actually get the healing and the help that you need. Like we are having check engine lights all the time.
Yep.
Our soul is throwing up, hey, I'm not okay. Hey, this thing is happening. And when we don't listen to them, our engine will seize. And so that's what happens so many times because pastors are not taught how to do vulnerability. Being a pastor is one of the scariest attachment jobs you can have.
Yeah, which I, by the way, that I have such an immense, and I've grown that throughout the years, like bigger and bigger, especially as I've healed of leadership wounds. I've grown this immense compassion because of these things you're about to say here towards all pastors being like, man, that's a rough spot. The culture tells you have to be a certain way. So now you buy into that culture. Now you're trapped in that cage. And then you're going to talk about the attachments.
Well, and then attachment pain is, I think, the deepest pain that any human goes through. And we all do weird things to get our attachment needs met.
Yeah.
Every single person does. And as a pastor, your attachment wounds are getting hit all the time.
All the time. When people are having pain with you, they're leaving your congregation, or
they're coming, they're going, they're blaming, they're normal, and your friends then are people that want something from you, or the power dynamic of being in charge and having all the people who
and
love you also
lonely.
sucking up. There's a loneliness. There's
not feeling like people are being honest with you. There's a lot of that mess as well. And this is in the context of, if you take away the destructive measures, these extremes, like what we're talking about with like, say, Mike and other people that are notable in the public eye, it's just like, normally speaking, they're just a normal pastor who has the normal messiness of life, not these extremisms or anything. And just inside of that, it would be so difficult to be them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that there's our goal in processing through this, as I've been watching, is how do we have that thing inside that says we need to stand up for what is right and we need to have a voice and we need to care about humans,
Right.
all of the humans,
Yeah.
the victims and the villains. Like we need to, and I think that's why I loved watching this video, because it felt like they did that. It felt like they stood for justice, but they also felt like they deeply loved all the people involved and want good for them.
Yeah. And I think that, again,
and obviously I don't know their hearts, and I'm sure they're messy, and I'm sure they're making messes too, because
I'm sure they're making, and that's one of the things, again, that Alan acknowledged is like, we probably have stuff that we're going to have to repent for in how we handled this, because they're probably making messes in there. We are all, that's again, we are all going to make messes. We're all going to create situations that we need to apologize for. We are all going to hurt one another. It doesn't matter what position of authority you're in. It doesn't matter how great your character is. You're gonna make mistakes, right? But it's about your acknowledgement of, I know that I'm human, and I know that I'm going to do that, and I'm willing to go clean those up and face those things, no matter how hard they feel inside of it. You know.
Yeah. It was very processing stuff like this can take you on a deep dive, and our encouragement to you is to allow it to bring you into more healing.
Yes.
And one of the things that I have consciously did is I have looked for leaders that do feel like they're carrying humility and love and honesty. And that's also why I liked watching the video, because what my brain wants to do is be like, no leader is safe.
Yeah.
When you see threats, and that's what our confirmation bias does in our brain. Our brain is meant to collect threats and put them together. And so it's so easy after you've been around for a long time and seen how many church leaders have failed to be like, no church leader is safe ever.
Yeah.
And that's actually not true.
Yep.
Because as many leaders as I've walked through this crazy stuff with, I've walked through things with leaders who have such deep, rich, humble hearts.
Yes.
Who want to learn and grow.
Yes.
Who care deeply for people.
Yes.
Who want the world to be a better place.
Yes.
Who are trying to bring love. And so it's important for my own sanity for me to see as much safety as I see threat.
Yeah.
And when there is a big threat, so like what can happen is you can start to pay attention. Like if you're following this story, you can start paying attention to every new moment of it. And your brain is now like focused on the threat. And then you need to consciously engage focusing on safety to just help balance it so that you have an awareness of both. I think it's easier to look at pain if you have one foot in safety.
You know, I was thinking about how, this is just a side note, how I'm not surprised by these matters. Like I am not anymore.
Totally.
And I'm not really, I'm affected in a different way. Like obviously this pushed a button
for you,
and multiple things all happen at once for me. But you know, like I was thinking about other people that they'll be like, I can't believe that happened. And I'm like, yeah, why not? Like, and I don't know if that's like a sad thing to say inside of it. But I think that one thing that helps us, even in maybe
well, we all want there to be a good parent.
Right.
We all want there to be a leader to look up to.
Right.
We want there to be somebody that shows us this is the way to live. We want there to be someone to be like, they are safe. And one day I could be like that. Like basically we're all little kids who want a healthy parent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why we want leaders to be better than human.
Yeah, absolutely.
It feels safe to us.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that I came to term with that throughout my pain process of watching leaders and stuff like that is that like, I'm going to be a leader one day. That was my thought back then. And I'm going to be messy and I'm going to make mistakes and I'm human. And the truth is they're human. And, and my pain is because I'm living in portion of my pain is because I'm living under the illusion that they have everything all together. Right. And I'm buying into the narrative that's built around that system over there. But when I let go of it, I think that there's a healthy part of me that's not surprised. And then there's an unhealthy part. But the healthy part of me that's not surprised is that part that's just like, well, yeah, they're going to make messes. And any one of us that gets put in those positions is going to make
messes.
a form of a mess.
Yeah, we don't have to make this.
We don't have to make this kind of mess.
We don't have to be abusive. But
but we're going to make some form of messes, maybe in the way we communicate with each other, or like a decision that other people don't agree with, but it's not immoral. It's just a decision that we feel like we're supposed to make.
Yep.
It's just all of that happens. And so again, this is part of it is a call to grace in one area. And with grace and understanding also comes a call to righteousness, which is actually there are things that actually need to be held accountable. And what does accountability look like is a whole other question. And part of that is individuals. Like for me, just using Mike as an example, because he's part of this conversation.
Yeah.
Accountability would have looked like him being like, actually, I'm going to a counselor. I'm going to multiple people on my board. I brought myself in and said, yes, I need to work on this stuff. I am the sole a problem here in this situation, not Jane Doe, not anyone else. And I know that I need to step down and I need to have my life healthily scrutinized, looked into, and I need to figure out how I got here inside of this. And I'm here to say yes to this process of repair inside of my soul for as many years as this takes, with whatever consequences comes down it. Like that to me is a sense of accountability.
Totally.
On something like this.
Yeah. I mean, I think that would feel so good.
Yeah.
I have compassion on pastors because oftentimes that's their career.
Totally.
And they're so scared, like, how will I make money and provide for my family?
Yeah, it's a hard one,
if I own this. And that, I think that gets complicated when we're paid.
And I think that a side note is that then comes into the conversation of, will we as a culture, whatever denomination you're part of or whatever institution you're part of, but will you as a culture, if someone will embrace humility, will you also embrace helping take care of them as they walk that out in the sense of like, okay, I see that you do have a family. How do we help walk alongside you and support you as you clean up your mess in your heart, as well as walking alongside these people that may have been victimized by your behavior and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think it's good to kind of note what justice is for people. And I know we need to wrap up, but I think what you're saying is really important because most of us, somebody will say, yeah, it's being taken care of. And we want to know how. What did they, like if somebody's accountable in our lives, we want to know what did they find was the root of why they did this behavior.
Yeah.
What have they done to heal that root? What have they done to change their body and brain habits?
Right. What
have they done to like change their nervous system and their neuroplastic mind pathways? And then what are they doing to stay consistently accountable? And
what are they doing to
most fractures should not be healed in 6 months.
No.
If somebody has had an affair or they've done something, they are not restored in 6 months. I'm telling you, you cannot do the work in 6 months and be whole again.
No.
Like if you got to a problem of an addiction or of moral failing, you are not a different person in 6 months. So there needs to be realistic timelines for what healing takes. And there needs to be where people are involved, where multiple people are hearing how that person is affecting things so that you're getting like a 360 view of things.
Yeah. And the truth is, if we're here on this planet to learn how to love, really, although that feels scary, that is such an that experience is such a gift. It's an invitational gift to actually get freed from the hell that we're inside of in those situations, and to get the liberation from our fears, from our self-hatreds, our self-condemnations, from the ways we've hurt other people. There's actually a good thing for it. It's a gift. It becomes this gift, and it can be something that's like, finally, I get free.
This could be the best thing that happens to Mike Bickle if he chooses, if he wants in, if he wants to heal.
It could be this most beautiful gift.
And even the repair that could happen in his heart from repentance, from humility. Yeah. The journey of walking this out could be the best thing that happens.
And I would like to say repentance, like I want to make a note on that word as we're wrapping up, because that is a word that I heard him say things, and I think that this is worth pointing out. Like, I repented every night that I did something. I went home and said, God, I'm so sorry for doing this. I feel terrible about this. I'm like, that is such religious jargon.
Yeah.
As a side note, repentance is just simply an awareness of like, hey, this isn't okay, and I need to start changing my directory, moving another direction.
Yes.
And to me, that is part of that repentance. Like true repentance to me is not just like, oh, I'm bad. It's like, no, I violated the law of love, and now I'm going to take strategic steps to repair what I violated, and to heal, and to be part of the healing process in any way that I can inside of that.
Maybe we should do another conversation with Paul Young, because he's one of the people that I watched walk out violating his family and then actually facing the process. It was a 11 year process for him to go on the healing process. And some of the relationships were longer and some of them were shorter. But
some of those have still not been repaired to this day after everything that's changed for him. And he's talked about the sadness of that, not because it's like, he's talked about how it's like, oh, I still feel broken, not because they don't like me, but because their heart is still broken by my decision, by
his behavior.
Yeah. And that is a repentance.
But what repentance looks like is he's never frustrated when people have to bring it back up again.
Yeah.
He's never frustrated of walking through it. And that's what that true humility of ownership and being willing to talk it out as long as it takes. Yeah. As deep as it goes. Yeah. Yeah. It's really important that people see what true repentance looks like so that they can notice when it's not.
Yeah. Anyways, hey, I know this is a pretty big episode here. As we're wrapping this up, living fully alive, it's been something that honestly we've watched people be able to walk a journey out like this, to actually begin to get the repair that they need inside of their lives and to begin to understand themselves. And, you know, we've had people that have gone through these courses who were in years of having like affairs with prostitutes and actually starting to get healing by participating inside of these spaces. Because finally they got seen by a group of people. They started seeing themselves. They started getting open and honest about the stuff going on inside of their world. And all of a sudden there was a healing that took place. And so to me, it is such an amazing program to participate in, especially like collectively with friends and family, because you can then begin to foster a culture that creates freedom. Foster a culture that is filled with vulnerability and transparency and grace inside of it. And so if you want to join that, I mean, we super recommend our immersion program because there's so much live experiences with other students. And you can go to Justin and Abi, that's abi.com, to go ahead and check that out.
And I think we should end with a prayer, because I think people get so disheartened they want to leave God. Yeah. And I just want to remind people that God is not like the leaders who failed you. Yeah. Yeah. So God, we just invite you to every heart that's been hurt by people who led in your name. Yeah. We invite you and your presence to remind people that you are love and you are goodness and you are self-control and you are kindness and you are patience. And every time we experience things that are outside of your nature, that's not a reflection of you. We just ask that there would be grace and love and just the closeness of your wraparound presence for anyone who's been hurt by church. Yeah. For anyone who's been hurt by church leadership. I just speak to your hearts, if it's something they want to hear, that God is different than what you've experienced. And I give you permission to grieve and be angry and be sad and be hurt and to let love in. And that your hearts could be able to still feel the steadiness of God's love, even when you feel the shaking of the people that represent him. Yeah. In Jesus' name, amen.
So thanks for that prayer, Abi. And if y'all want to listen to this, we got a testimony here for Living Full. Yeah. Woo! Check that out. And we're out.
This has impacted my husband and I because we did it together, as well as our two grown daughters. Now, was very humbling. What you said about having compassion towards yourself is huge because you're like,
that.
oh my goodness, I have messed up my kids so much. But it has given my girls and I conversation, how to do it without judgment and just compassion, but be honest and real with each other. And we have a 20-year-old son at home and then 16 and 12. The whole one on validation. Oh my goodness. I mean, it was just like sometimes in the teen years, they just need you to validate them. And that has just been incredible. I'm like, oh, I wish we knew this when the older girls were younger. But there's just been so much grace and compassion the way you all have taught it. Our oldest is now married almost 4 years, and they have a little 9-month boy. And it's so neat just to see the new beginnings for them and how to parent and how to love and how to have conversations. And it's just been life transforming for our whole family. Oh, yeah.
I just want to tell you, it is so brave what you did. And there are so many parents that refuse to go on that process. I think one of the things parents don't understand is it's not if you were perfect or not. It's really about how you're willing to walk it out from here forward.
Yeah.
Like we've worked with thousands of people, and anyone whose parent is willing to go on the journey, they get so much healing and closeness from getting to talk through it now. And I think that shame always comes and wants to wipe people out and be like, you ruined it all. Yeah. That's it. The truth is the humility it takes to learn and grow and have hard conversations. It's hard.
Especially when you realize I was proactively doing everything I could to love you. And then I really hurt you in some ways. And I didn't even know that was happening. Like that's just such a gut punch. But it also brings us back to the reality of like, we're going to accidentally hurt people. And in that, grace gets to flood in.
I just want to make sure you celebrate how huge your heart is. You're so precious. So thank you so much. Love having you on the journey. Love those stories.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Goodbye.